going to call this meeting of the Forest Lake Planning Commission to order. Could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Brink.
Here.
Commissioner Kubal.
Here.
Commissioner Steeler.
Here.
Chair Gerard.
Okay, for those who are able, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I am looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented to us.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed
I should abstain for that.
to approve the agenda?
Oh, the agenda, I'm sorry. I'll say aye to that, sorry. Need
Okay.
a little bit more of this. I'll be good.
Are you sharing? All right, I have the agenda approved. I'm seeking a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from August 24th, 2022.
So moved.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
One abstaining.
And I'm abstaining too, because I wasn't there.
Okay, two abstaining. It's not quite legit to make the motion, but that's okay. We'll let it slide.
Oh, you can make the motion without necessarily being there. The rest don't have to approve it.
Nathan, are you talking to us about the Birchwood Estates revised concept plan?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair. So I would note that Abby is homesick. She's been sick for about a week. She thought she was going to be able to attend this meeting, but unfortunately just wasn't well yet. So she does send her regrets and apologizes if there's anything outstanding that she is supposed to deliver to you yet. So with that being said, the Birchwood Estates item is something that the Planning Commission is fairly familiar with, I believe. At least most of you are. So in February of this year, the Planning Commission and the City Council approved a preliminary plat and PUD for Birchwood Estates. Karen, if you don't mind sharing the screen here. So as the screen populates, it'll show the approved preliminary plat and PUD that was approved by the city in February. Since that approval, the developer, John Anderson, who is here this evening with us, was unable to get the Rice Creek watershed district and the TEP panel's approval on some of the proposed impact, or the impacts that would result to some of the wetlands in this area. And so since that time, the staff has worked with the developer and the watershed district, I should mention, to see if there can be an alternate concept developed that will meet not only the watershed's expectations for wetland preservation, but also the city's goals with respect to residential development. So Mr. Anderson did submit the new concept plan, which I'll show. So on the screen here, you can see the formerly approved preliminary plat. On the screen now, you will see the revised concept based on the some of the issues that were identified during the review process by the watershed. So you can see on this screen specifically some of those wetlands that are at issue with the approved preliminary plat. You can see wetland 4, which the cursor is hovering over, is a definite obstacle. And you can see this would be wetland 2, which is another significant obstacle to residential units being built and roads through those wetlands, necessitating that impact. So the differences between the two of these are not substantial. The alignment of the roadways through this concept plan that you see in front of you are very similar to the alignment of the roads. I'll flip back to in the former preliminary plat, or the current, I guess, currently approved preliminary plat. The unit count is the same. In addition, the mix of the townhomes, you'll note detached townhomes, they are called, in the southwest corner of this approved preliminary plat. The unit mix of those two single-family homes is the same in the concept that is now on the screen. The main difference here is the number of lots that are single-family and the widths of those lots. So in the former plan, you have 65, 70-foot, and 80-foot wide lots throughout the development, with some of those issues that the developer encountered with the watershed. In order to meet that same unit count, they will need the flexibility of 65-foot wide lots. So that's why that is shown on the concept plan. So in the staff report, Abby does note that the net density will increase in the concept from 2.1 to 2.4 units per acre, but also noting that there are some outstanding pieces of information related to net density. Also in the staff report, you will see the 4 developments that Abby has provided to you, which are similar in terms of the lot sizes that were permitted previously. Those include Bridle Pass, Chestnut Creek, Evergreen Ridge, and Hidden Creek, all somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 square feet in terms of minimum lot size. So one of the reasons that these developments had that flexibility or were permitted to develop with those minimum lot sizes below the standard is really to protect some of the natural features in the city and also simultaneously conform to the density goals of the comp plan. And so that is why some of those developments have come through already. Staff are bringing this concept plan to the Planning Commission this evening for 2 reasons. I would say the first is to kind of provide you with a real example of some of the challenges that are created when developing some of this greenfield area in the city, noting significant issues that we have with wetlands. In this example, that's 17% of the overall site. And then the second reason that this is brought in front of the Planning Commission is that we would like to have your feedback on what you see in this concept. Does the revised concept meet your expectations for this area? Noting that it is more in line with what is expected from both the comp plan point of view and from the watersheds. So with that, I will say we do have the developer here to answer some of your questions or perhaps provide some more information about how this concept came together. I'd suggest that you hear from him and then ask us any questions you have before providing some feedback.
Are there members of the Planning Commission that would like to comment?
Question, I noticed on the original approved plat, you have sidewalks and paths up and down the streets in the middle and down on the bottom on the south side, and on the new concept plan, you don't have any of that stuff in there. I'm just wondering if there's a plan for any type of sidewalks or walking paths in the actual concept plan. And then my second question is, where you show the wetlands, where you're drawing the darker circles, I see there's lots that are kind of in the middle of some of those wetland concepts. I'm just wondering if that's a problem for building. But must not be if you have it on the plan. I'm just curious.
And with both John's and the Planning Commission's permission, if you're okay with this, could we have a fairly free-ranging discussion?
That's fine with me, yeah.
All right. Then yes, sir, I get, once again, name and
Yes,
address.
John Anderson, I represent Eternity Homes. Address is 14832 Estate Avenue Southeast, Prior Lake. Just to start with, and I'll answer the couple questions here in a second. One correction I want to make, the approved preliminary plat was not the approved version. The approved version actually had 74 units. That's when the one that's on the plan shows 73. There was actually one of the detached single-family lots added down in the south kind of west corner of that intersection right off County Road 50. So it's actually one final version that was approved after this one that had an extra lot in it. So the new concept is actually 1 unit short of the previous preliminary plat that was approved, the 74 units. As far as the sidewalks and paths, our intent is to basically put in the same sidewalks and trails that were previously shown. In the concept, we just didn't show it. The trail on the very western boundary going around the outside of the lots is on the concept, same with the trail along the county road. We just don't show the street for just illustration purposes that would have sidewalk on it. As far as the wetlands that are being impacted, those wetlands would have to be corrected. So any soils in there would have to be corrected to good soil. So from a building standpoint, there would be correction that would take place. New soil would be put in there. There'd be compaction tests done by a geotechnical engineer that would have to satisfy city requirements. So before any house could be built, that soil would be redone, compacted, tested, and meet city requirements for a house to go on those lots. So we're not, we don't have any issues with the wetland impact. Kind of going back just to a little bit of the history, we received our preliminary plat approval last spring of this year, I guess I should say. One of the conditions was to get watershed approval. We could never get through the watershed approval. After a few months, 4 or 5 months of discussions and back and forth, we basically scrapped the old plan, kind of came up with this new version, which really has a lot of the same layout. It's just really 204th Street, which comes in from Hawthorne Heights. Instead of curving south and then lining up our four-way intersection with the cul-de-sac, kind of curves slightly to the north. And the purpose of that was that big wetland number 2 in the middle of that outlot, where it's kind of being impacted on the north side and the very south end along where the trail is. The watershed wanted that wetland to be saved. So the plan is on either side of that wetland, there will be ponding put in place, so you can't really see the ponding. So that ponding will be adjusted and added on either side of that. And the watershed has indicated that they're willing to work with this concept because it does save that additional wetland. I forget the acreage amount, but I want to say it was like close to 1/2 acre of additional wetland is being saved. That was a hayfield where that is right now. That hay has been taken off of it, so it wasn't a high quality wetland, but it is being saved with this version. If we would have stuck with the same premise with the 80-foot lots on the northwest side, the 70 in the middle, we'd have lost about another 8 to 10 lots with our concept plan. So by doing it this way, we added more single-family detached and made all the lots 65 feet wide, which is what the lots over on the east side of the plat were originally designed at. And we got to 73, but we're still 1 lot short. So what we're here for is just to kind of discuss, is this something that's been open? Obviously, I was at the workshop here recently that the Planning Commission had here at the city regarding long-term zoning design, lot sizes, comp plan criteria and things like that. So I guess that's part of this overall discussion that's been ongoing. And we're just kind of showing this in the meantime to say, here's something that would potentially fall under that would work for us if it was something the city eventually did approve. So with that, I can take any other questions too.
Other questions? Because now I'm really confused, I'm sorry. The dark hatched areas are wetlands that you are going to unwetland.
To impact,
You're going to make them no longer wetlands.
correct.
And then you've got an area, an outlot to the northeast. You've got a significant area to the northwest. You've got an outlet on the southwest. And then you've got a large area on the due east. And those are going to be your wetlands.
Yes, they're going to remain as is,
Okay,
remain wetland.
okay.
The only change in the wetland impacts is that one kind of just to the southwest of that 204th and Access Road. That's now being saved. Other than that, all the other wetland impacts are the same as previously shown.
Okay. Is there going to be are you thinking of an HOA? Because there are some significant outlot areas, wetland areas, and large backyards. I'm especially concerned about the ones on the northwest and that back up to the trail, that northwest wetland and the one to the due east. Is there going to be an HOA that will maintain those, or is the expectation of the developer to build the homes and then have the city maintain all those areas?
Those wetlands do not need maintaining. They're natural wetlands and would just stay natural. They would not be maintained. They're not stormwater ponds. The stormwater ponds would be in other areas that would be in a drainage utility easement in the city. Originally, the HOA was gonna be done for the single-family detached and the outlot areas, or green space that would be around those. The single-family lots would be individual owned with no HOA or be part of an HOA.
Okay. So that outlot on the north and east and the outlot on the south and west are not full wetlands, and is there an expectation that those are green space that the city will be expected to maintain?
The one in the north and east was approved by the city previously as future parkland.
Okay.
So
That
that would
helps.
be the park dedication share, and then that would be split between the properties to the north, northeast, and east. There'd be additional land taken for a larger park long-term, and this would be our share of that long-term park. So that would be owned by the city as part of the park system, and eventually there'd be playground or whatever would, be put on there by the city. The one in the southwest would be ponding area around that one wetland on both sides, and it could be possible that that is an outlot the city maintains, or it could be added into the outlot around the other detached. That's just taking that one line away where it kind of follows the backyards. And that could be done either way, I guess. I guess from our end, if the HOA covers that, the city would still be responsible for any stormwater ponding maintenance like they would in any development, and drainage utility easements would be over that area. But who officially owns that is a question. One question I wanted to bring up is long-term plans for HOAs in the city, knowing that we do have a model home over in the Hawthorne Heights neighborhood, a couple houses to the west. We just received notice here this week, they're dissolving their HOA out there. And they're taking a vote on that in the next week as we speak. And if that happens, how does the common area, I don't know how that's gonna work with the city from that standpoint. So that's something that is part of this overall bigger picture discussion item that potentially affects, this project and how that area proceeds forward. Our initial plan was we'd have an HOA, but if other neighborhoods are getting rid of that, we would like to go down that same route. We'd rather not have an HOA if we don't have to. So I guess that's just something from a discussion standpoint here to bring up tonight.
On the other hand, it does put an increased burden on the city and the other taxpayers in the city.
Not if the property's maintained privately. The ponds themselves will be maintained by the city no matter what. The green space around it and what the idea is, from my understanding in Hawthorne Heights, is they would like to split the green space up on each individual lot and make it part of the actual little square ownership. And then everyone just maintains their own yard, because that's what's going on right now, is everyone just maintains their own yard area, plows their own snow. The HOA basically does nothing other than own that outlot right now. Other than that, they do no items in Hawthorne Heights. So, and I know there's been discussion in the past about those types of lots and the reasoning for the HOA and all that, so.
Okay. Other planning commissioner questions? I've got one more. The argument has been over and over and over again that financially, the developer cannot make this work without really small lots. If the city were to say, as part of our MXR, that we would essentially throw away some of these areas and allow them to be developed as duplexes or triplexes, does that help your financing?
We don't want to do that product, so we would walk away. We want
That-
single-family product. It's what we want to develop. I'm not saying some other builder might not want to do that, but we don't want to develop that product.
Interesting. So it's really not a density thing. It's a
Well,
single-family.
it's a product type. We don't want to do a product that we can't sell. And if we can't sell a product, there's no point in doing the development. You have to have a market demand for that type of unit to be able to want to do that unit and develop it. As a developer, our whole goal is to make a profit. If we can't make a
get that.
profit, there's no point in doing a project. And to go down, we don't develop multifamily structures like duplexes, triplexes, or anything. And as a builder, that's just what we do, is we build single-family homes. So we don't want to do a product, or a project, I should say, that has a product we don't develop or build currently. That's just not our niche, and we don't want to be involved in that type of stuff. So, not saying that we'd never, ever do that at some point in time, but at this point in time, we don't want to go down that road.
That helps me. Other comments from planning commission members? For Nathan? So are you helping, for Bridle Pass, Chestnut Creek, Evergreen Ridge, and Hidden Creek, those are all lots that are all 7,000 square foot lots?
Yes, so the city has, in those cases, permitted deviations down to that minimum lot size.
So each of the lots in all of those developments are 7,000 square foot lots?
That is not correct.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
No, yeah, so as you would see here, a developer will come in and say, I need the smallest lot that I can make work here is this, for example. In terms of how a PUD actually comes about, right? But many of the lots within their development may be larger. For example, a cul-de-sac will have, a pretty narrow front part of that lot, but oftentimes you'll see a pretty wide, kind of wedge-shaped lot. And so the answer is no, not all the lots are that size.
From a real estate point of view, sir, your thoughts?
Oh, I like it. I mean, he's handcuffed. I mean, I totally get where he's coming from with, the wetlands and the product and the water. And he's got 74 lots or 73 lots and the one we've already kind of preliminary approved. And he's got about the same in this, but of course, because of the wetlands and the obstacles, he's had to downsize the lots. I see this product all over the Twin Cities and it sells, so I like it. I mean, in terms of the way he's got it laid out. I liked it better when the roads were more curved and, not as straight, but I totally get the challenges. But personally, I don't see an issue with it. Justin?
No, I concur. I couldn't add or take away from that.
Any other comments?
And just as a note, I mean, this does have the 7.5-foot side yard setbacks that
Yeah.
we've kind of discussed over the last few weeks, but is still kind of in discussion, just so that everybody's aware of that.
And I should clarify, the single family do have a 7.5-foot side yard setback. The single family detached also would have 15 feet between the structures, so 7.5, based on one on each of the buildings. Some of the units do allow for a 3-stall garage, so when you come on 204th Street, I think there's roughly 8 of them there. Those would allow for a 3-car garage, a 50-foot wide pad. The other ones are narrow and be 2-car garages. The one thing we've noticed when we were selling out of the Hawthorne Heights model is that a lot of people wanted that option for that 3rd stall. So we have taken that into account and added some of those units. So if we were to made them all 2-car, we may have got another unit in there. But to have that option, I think it makes sense. And I know we've talked about that at this level before, about people storing boats and everything else. That 3rd stall will help for that, so.
And with that 3rd stall that you show now, you're still getting that 15 feet.
Yes, there would still be the 15 between the structures.
Yeah.
Correct.
Any other comments? Does that help you out?
Yeah, I guess that's our I should say where we at right now is just to get some feedback. Obviously, to do this would either require a plan unit development or a zoning ordinance change to the zoning district that would allow this more of just a normal standard use, and then at that point you wouldn't need the plan unit development. So we've been very cautious of spending a lot of money right now. We did the concept plan after talking with Abby, just so you guys had something to kind of look at. I had kind of sketched something up by hand, just cleaned up what we were talking about. And I know there's some other items that you guys have been dealing with. I think you're even discussing a little bit tonight. So we're gonna try to probably wait and see how everything plays out on the zoning ordinance standpoint before we move forward at this point. And like I said, the numbers are tight. Obviously, the economy, the market has been pretty darn slow the last few months and has gotten slower. So interest rates keep rising, so it's something that we're gonna be very cautious about at this point. And, the numbers were already really tight on this project, and, like I said, if we were to lose 4 or 5 lots in here, we wouldn't, the reality is we cannot proceed forward, just due to economic reasoning, so. So yes, that helps out, and I just want to get a feeling for these lot sizes, because obviously it's less than what we did before with some of the bigger lots, and from our standpoint, this is the product we really truly want. We had some of it in the previous one, but we want some bigger lots. We're not against them, but this is really what the market's calling for right now, so, and that's, we're building this product in quite a few other cities as well, so.
Nathan, from a timing perspective, by the time we work out an ordinance, it will probably be faster for him to do a PUD, correct?
Yeah, so the way that I understand Abby's preferred timeline for the ordinance amendment, you may see something hopefully by the new year in terms of an adjusted city ordinance. So at that time, if John were to come in and apply, if an ordinance amendment is made that would allow this type of thing by right, then it would be a more simple review of the, it would effectively be reapplying for the preliminary plat. The developer, John could also come in with a PUD right now. That is correct, right now, yep.
As in, before interest rates go higher and inflation goes higher.
Well, even if we started now or 3 months from now, the loan goes into place next spring. So it doesn't matter from if we get approved in December or we get approved in February. When we close, it's gonna be the same date either way. So whatever the interest rate is at that point is what we're dealing with.
Okay.
So, like I said, the layout that we have now, I mean, I too like the old layout that was approved. We just couldn't get through that one wetland with the watershed, was really the holdup of that whole project. If that would've gone through last spring, we'd have probably a model home going up right now with streets blacktopped. So, that's kind of, where things are at, is it really, that one wetland is what held this whole site up at this point, so. So now we've made accommodations to limit the impact on it. There's no way to completely get rid of it, because 204th Street has to go through there and it has to impact that wetland. So, we have to impact the wetland on the south side with the trail along the county road. So it's getting hit on both sides, and it comes down to, we still don't know the full grading extent either, because we haven't done a full revised grading plan. Now, half of this site, the changes are gonna be minimal, so we're kind of ahead of the game on where we normally be, but the grading down there has to be figured out. There may even be a little bit more impact if we have to connect the Ponce and the north end to get it to drain correctly, or some sort of storm pipe for the overflow or whatever, I don't know. But that's something we gotta determine yet, so.
Just about all of Forest Lake is outwash plain. I mean, from a land form perspective, it's just about all outwash plain with a little bit of esker on the eastern edge. So much of the city, when you come in to buy a piece of property to develop, it's gonna have wetland issues and it's not gonna drain. And so I keep being surprised that we hear, well, we have to do small lots because of the wetlands.
Yeah.
They've been
Well,
here.
I don't think it's so much the wetlands, it's the cost of doing the development. The cost of putting in sewer, water, streets, grading. I mean, what the costs are this last summer were 100% higher than the year before. And they're probably 200% higher than they were 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, if you're paying, a third of what you're paying now, the numbers make more sense because you didn't have as many expenses in the development side of things. There's also things like city fees and engineering, and all that stuff has gone up, just like everything is inflation with the whole world right now. Everything has inflation, and the cost of building a project is really the big key here. It's not so much the wetlands, it's the cost of making a project work. And like I said, we're getting to the point where you can barely even pay anything for the land because it's just so expensive to build a project. And, it all depends on what city, what, type of product. There's areas where lot prices are selling for $200,000 all day long. There's areas where they're selling for $70,000. You gotta look at what the market bears, because you can't say, we're gonna sell them for 150 here when they're not worth 150. So you gotta make sure your numbers work financially. And that's one of the challenges Forest Lake has, is because you don't demand as high a value for typical lot than you would say in Blaine or Lino Lakes. Just the closer in you get, the more expensive the lots are.
And the further out you get, you got to be more conscious of your costs. And that's part of the issue that's going on here, so.
Thank you.
Is that everything then?
I think that I don't hear anything else from the other commissioners.
All right, thank you.
You're waiting for me. All right, so this item is also based on Abby's staff report. We've been talking about implementing zoning code changes to have the zoning code more accurately reflect the goals articulated in the comp plan. The discussion really has largely been about the MXR1, but I would remind you that we also have talked about more recently some changes to the agriculture district to permit maybe some more uses that are seen as compatible. Commercial uses, that is, that are compatible with agriculture or residential. In addition, we've also recently discussed some of those uses along the Highway 61 corridor, revisiting perhaps the mixed use designation or classification of properties along there. So this staff report, though, is focused on hopefully finalizing some of the discussions that have occurred around the MXR1, specifically with respect to some of the other standards that we have discussed. So Abby has provided an example of some of the developments that have occurred more in recent times, but also like Hawthorne Heights, which we have discussed in the previous item, noting some interesting variation here in terms of total net acreage, minimum lot size, and resulting densities. So you can see that the densities of these developments really do tend to vary, and I think a lot of this is really context specific, right? The specific property, how much wetlands are on there and would have to be impacted, et cetera. Chestnut Creek, I would just note to you, has been a particular, that one has just, there's wetlands galore in there, and the building department will agree with you. Abby and her staff report included the lot size of, the amendments that were proposed by myself in reviewing Donovan's work, and then also has provided the lot standards that she has proposed. Specifically, this breaks down into a couple different areas. We have discussed lot sizes kind of ad nauseum. Abby has provided a number of example minimum lot sizes from other developments in the staff report, noting that there's a couple reasons the city should consider amending its own minimum lot size for all MXR1 properties. Number one is that there is now a kind of a pattern of what has seemed to work in the past in terms of minimum lot sizes. And so perhaps we should be looking at that in terms of future development. And second, and importantly, we have seen that, obviously, if you do the maths, a 7,500 square foot lot would result in a gross density of approximately 5.8 acres, units per acre. But we've seen this a lot where we're permitting lot sizes that are pretty small like that, 7,500, and they're still not really getting close to that 5-6 units per acre. They're close to, let's say, 1, 2, 3 units per acre. So that is one of those reasons why the city has been presented with some of those changes by staff. I'm going to move on to, and Abby has noted here that staff is pretty familiar with some of the conversations that we've already had, so I don't know if there's necessarily any reason in going too far more in that area. Minimum lot width is one of those standards we kind of discussed, but we haven't really gone into as much detail. So as currently proposed, the city would adopt a 65-foot wide lot standard for all detached products. And that is only in cases where there is no HOA. And what we mean by no HOA is that that commonly owned lot would have within it, as you saw in the concept plan of Birchwood Estates, some of the actual footprints of those buildings, but that common area between them would be owned, and therefore that 65-foot wide limit wouldn't apply. So in cases where we have detached lots, the proposal is 65 feet wide, and you have a number of development examples in your staff report that kind of articulate a kind of a range of different widths that have been proposed previously. An average of those, notably, is 67 feet. So I'll move on to setbacks. So this is another really fundamental kind of zoning regulation. So we have our minimum lot area, we have the width of our lot, and we have the setbacks of where a structure can be located within that lot. And so you have a number of examples here of what has been permitted in the past. We have front yard setbacks, which I think we all are pretty familiar with how these all work, and I'm happy to explain them if we don't know, but front yard, side yard, and rear yard. Currently, the city's standard is 30 in the front yard, 10 in the side yard, and 30 in the rear yard. So in terms of the front yard setback, there has been a decent amount of discussion by the commission, between the commission and staff. Staff have previously proposed a 25-foot setback for the house specifically, and a 30-foot setback for a garage. And so what that is meant to do is to bring houses closer to the street, to kind of break up some of the monotony of those garage doors on streets, and kind of enliven the streetscape here. So that has been proposed in the past, and Abby has noted a number of really nice ways that a city can, create design standards or require certain design elements in single-family construction. So that's kind of been the conversation of the front yard setback. Staff do note, though, that there could be some issues, obviously, as we've discussed with, you have less than a 20-foot setback, and you might have issues with vehicles overhanging a sidewalk. As we know, residents like to have their toys. In the conversations around side yards, really the conversation has been, is the city comfortable with going less than 10? Staff note that 7.5 feet setbacks are the ones that have been requested most commonly. And specifically, when paired with that 65-foot lot width, that would allow for a 50-foot building pad, which is kind of the standard. Abby does note here that the fire chief was consulted, and fire chief, in the name of safety, does prefer that 10-foot standard. And then lastly, the rear setback, there's not really much to say about this one. Staff do not propose changes, and really that setback does kind of create that open space that folks expect from their rear yard. So that's kind of that's a summary of the staff report here. We have 4 questions at the end of the report that'd be helpful to work through to provide some more detailed, focused comments. So with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Yes, sir.
Nathan, have we ever seen where, or have you seen when a developer comes through and on the side where the walking path or the sidewalks are going to be, that the setback is different on that side versus the other side of the street if there isn't a sidewalk or walking path? So for example, if, let's say, we approved a 25-foot or even a 20-foot front setback, that would be okay on the side where there's no sidewalk or walking path, but if you're on the side where there's a sidewalk or walking path, it has to be 25 or 30 feet. Have you ever seen that, or can a city do something like that?
It strikes me as possible. What I would tell you is it may appear that there's varying distances often, but the sidewalk is typically located, or the trail is typically located within the right-of-way. And so we're establishing those setbacks from the front property boundary, which is not always where you might expect that, or you might think is coming from the edge of the trail. In some cases, maybe that is the edge of the right-of-way, but it varies, I would say. Okay. So, but to have a short answer, no, I don't see that very, very commonly.
And potentially it wouldn't make a difference.
That's correct.
Or on the side where there's a sidewalk or a walking path, the garage would have to be recessed versus out. Is that something a city could do?
Sure, it's possible. I think the reason why it may not be as common, or that perhaps I haven't run across it, is just because it does kind of create additional complexity, or it could create possible confusion for staff, but also just for the development community if they're trying to understand the standards. Not that it can't be done, but that may be why it's not very common. One thing I would note, though, that is very common is we have corner properties where you have your main road, let's say, where your access is, and then you have a side street that runs across the property. In those cases, we do see specifically articulated setbacks for the side street side. So it's not uncommon to see that type of thing.
Other thoughts from Plan Commission members? I would be much more comfortable, one, if we set minimum lot standards, then all the lots will come in at those minimum lot standards. And one of the things that we've been able to do with PUDs is to provide varying lot standards so that our neighborhoods don't look, y'all are too young to hear, don't look ticky-tacky, little pink houses, all look the same. We've been able to have some diversity in our neighborhoods, which is a good thing. I'm really concerned with the huge amount of the city compared to other land uses and other codes that is MXR. And what I would prefer that we do is say, yeah, we may need to do a comp plan change to look at whether or not all of that is truly MXR that we're going to have at 7,000 foot lots and before we go there. I would encourage you all to drive through bridle paths frequently at different times of the day. Because of the number of cars that are parked in the street, the fact that those are much smaller lots, and that's where the kids are also playing, is in those streets. And so when we're looking at this, it's not really what I would call a family friendly, unless you're a one or two person family. We don't have transit here. You can't walk here. You can't get groceries here without vehicles. And so as soon as a kid turns 16 here, they're looking to have a car. So you have more cars in a community like Forest Lake than you might in another community with smaller lots that has walkable grocery stores or jobs within a walkable distance. So my concern right now is having a very large amount of the city with a minimum lot size, which will be the lot sizes. And we will lose the flexibility and we'll lose the ability to make our neighborhoods look and feel less regimented and more, I don't want to say interesting. The other thing that truly frustrates me is I said it before, we are geomorphically, we're outwash plain. We're flat, we've got a lot of wetlands. We always will have. And to say that we have to have small lots to get to a net density, and I don't believe, I need to go back and do my research, but I don't remember our comp plan using the term net density. So I need to go back and I need to check that because I was going to try and do that tonight. But we do have a lot of wetlands, and it's always going to affect what we're doing. And so I really want to make sure that using the excuse of we have so many wetlands, which our comp plan introduction, I did find that, says that we value. I mean, when we look at what are our top values and our overarching goals, that's kind of where we're at. We don't have any overarching goals for maximum density. And so that's a concern, and then I also want to make sure that we are, as a planning commission, understanding that with these minimum lot sizes, there are going to be significant city costs that will not be recovered through tax rates at the current levels. I mean, that just is what it is. It's just math. As my daughter would say, Mom, it's just math. So there are more than just how can we help developers or how can we make our Met Council friends happier. We're not Blaine. We don't have that kind of landforms. We just don't, and we don't have their transit. So what I would like to have us do from a, and this is just one planning commission member, I would like to have us have those real discussions about how much MXR we want to have in the city, realizing that if you put these minimum lot sizes in, those will be the lot sizes. Whether or not where do we value the natural resources in the ag and things like that we talked about in the comp plan. And should we take a look at some of the other ways that we could achieve density, such as by allowing accessory dwelling units, which we don't at all. And you can get some really quick wins on increasing density in existing places with the ability to do accessory dwelling units.
Is that in our comp plan, the accessory dwelling, or something we were just proposing?
Pardon me?
The accessory dwelling?
We don't allow them here.
Well, I know we don't, but wasn't that something that was up for discussion recently?
I keep bringing it up.
I think it came up when we went through the comp plan.
Yeah, okay, I recall it,
think
but
it did
it's
come
been a
up.
while.
Just so everyone's on the same page, accessory apartments are permitted in the city, but that is not the same as traditionally as you'd understand the ADU, which is that the apartments have to be within an existing principal structure, and the access to those units has to be from within. So it's a lot more controlled than you would find in an ADU, which may be in a lofted bedroom or unit, for example, above a detached garage as kind of a standard template for that type of thing. Okay. I would just ask, are there any reactions to these? And I've taken notes on the discussion so far. Are there any comments specific to the kind of specific questions that are established in the 4 bullet points at the end of this report? The first one is the commission favorable to front yard setbacks of 20 feet for houses?
I would say I am.
Okay.
And that's with a garage. I mean, the way it's worded here, it's 20 feet.
I would like to see.
And it doesn't say anything about sidewalks. So I
Yeah.
want to make sure that Nathan has the notes that you're looking for.
20 feet to the house, I would be okay with, and 30 feet to the garage. I'm sorry, 25 feet to the garage then. 25 to the house, 30 to the garage, that's fine, but I'm okay with 20 and 25.
Okay.
Me personally,
With or without a sidewalk.
yeah. Because it
Okay.
doesn't impact, he said.
So just to be clear,
Setback is usually from the
front lot
curb.
line.
Curb.
The
Yeah.
setback is actually not from the curb. Often the curb, so we have our overall right-of-way, but we have the curb of our street is typically within that area. And so the edge of the right-of-way is the same as your front lot line, and that's the point from which we measure the setbacks for the houses. Does that make sense?
Would be the 20 or the 25 plus.
So, yeah, so you'll have, from the front of your house, you'll have, in this case, 20 feet to the front property boundary. From there, you'll still have some, most often, boulevard space before you hit the curb. That boulevard space plus the curb and anything to the center line of the road is all right-of-way.
So it is or is not including the
Then I
sidewalk.
really want us to talk about what is a appropriate sidewalk width.
Yeah, I agree with that part too.
So I want to say the city standard at present is 6 feet wide.
Where do we have any of those?
We-
Wide sidewalk, really?
Yeah, so I believe, don't quote me on this, I think our engineering standard currently is 6 feet wide.
Is that for a trail or a sidewalk?
No, for trails, it's 10
Okay,
feet
we're
wide.
asking
No,
sidewalk.
trails are
Trail is
10
10
feet
feet.
wide, bituminous trails, like you saw
I don't know
in
if
wrapping
those
around the
sidewalks
side of Birchwood Estates, that would be a 10-foot trail. A sidewalk is most often concrete, and that will be, the standard, I believe, is 6 feet. Although I'd have to double check the engineering standards for that.
Do we have any 6-foot sidewalks anywhere in this city?
I think mine is about 6 inches.
Yeah, 6 inches seems right, but
Some of the older sidewalks, I think, are gonna be more narrow, certainly. Some of the newer subdivisions, and I can't remember anything that's gone in, so, let's see, one of the examples would be,
What about the one over by, heading to Target by Wells Fargo, the Wells Fargo Street? Is that 4th or?
so in the headwaters
Those-
area, yeah, those might be examples of
Town.
where it's been 6 feet. I'm thinking of, actually in the headwaters,
Oh, okay.
headwaters 9th through 12th editions are newer.
Well, there was sidewalks that were put in, what, how many years ago now? Just a couple of years over by, I don't know what the width those are, but.
So I'm noting the question about sidewalk width. I will, or Abby will come back with more information for you on
It
that.
makes a difference.
Certainly.
Sure it does.
I would be more favorable to a 10-foot side yard setback than the 7.5. I'd rather keep it the way it is. I'd be more favorable for a 25 and 30 for the front. And I honestly have no idea about a 30. I'm not sure what my opinion on that is for the backyard.
Nathan, earlier in the week, I had emailed Abby about being new on the commission here and not being familiar with all these other neighborhoods like Bridle Pass you mentioned and Chestnut Creek and Evergreen and Hidden Creek. I asked her if I could get like a map, just a schematic of where these neighborhoods are so I could drive through them. And I didn't realize she was sick, and that's probably why she wasn't able to get me anything. But I think it would, for me, my benefit, I'd love to drive through every one of these neighborhoods with this in front of me so I know setbacks here and setbacks there so that I can see what Susan's talking about.
Yeah, certainly.
So that'd be great if something like that could be.
Yeah, I'll continue to defer to Abby on that, but that is something that I think can be done,
Yeah.
certainly.
Okay.
Bridle Pass, think over by the high school,
Yeah.
Appaloosa, Arabian, all those names.
I don't drive around by the high school much, but over past the tennis courts on that side, on the far side of the high school?
Right,
Okay, I know vaguely those roads, but I
opposite the
don't.
fields and, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So when that development started coming around, I was in real estate at the time. I was doing a lot of open houses there, and it's definitely a poster child for kind of what you were saying. Just very tight, a lot of cars even back then. That's been, what, 20 years ago now? But,
There aren't any fewer.
what's that?
There aren't any fewer
No,
cars.
no.
Okay, Chestnut Creek, if you're going out 97, just before you get to the wetlands in Tim's Marina, I think the Chestnut Creek sign is still up there. And it's to the
Heading out
south.
west on 97.
Heading east on 97 towards Scandia.
Yeah, east, that's,
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
And it's on the road to the right, and it's,
Okay.
which street is it? It's one of the I streets, isn't it?
Isn't it just past the golf course?
Yeah, it could, yeah, it is. It's
Okay.
just past the golf course, you're right.
They take a right.
Are we talking about Hero Avenue? Isn't that Chestnut Creek
Yeah.
going south by Forest
Yeah.
Hills?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, all right.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, the real recent one.
I have no clue where Hidden Creek is.
Hidden Creek is in the headwaters area, over on, the property owner in that area is Chris Taylor.
Oh, isn't that the one that we just approved just now?
Yeah, so the Hidden
It isn't
Creek,
built yet.
the Hidden Creek preliminary plat was approved. They have received the planning commission's approval for the final PUD. However, they were revisiting their phasing, and so they're kind of yet to deliver the final thoughts on the phasing as far
But
as
you
I know.
can't see that one,
Right.
and that was a PUD instead of
Okay.
And then,
Evergreen Ridge was the other one that's right
isn't
away
that the one
on.
over by Menards?
No, that's, that's, that's,
Could have sworn that was the one over by Menards.
thought it was,
Over by the two sets of apartments, and I still don't understand why all the apartments that we put together aren't helping us with density. But that's a whole nother question.
In these areas where setbacks are less and more people are parking on the street, do we have complaints from the residents that live there that are tangible things that are reported that make it difficult to live there? Or for like fire trucks to get through, or is it all kind of more of a cosmetic, we want our neighborhoods to look different?
If you're asking whether I've received any complaints, the answer would actually be no, I haven't really received any complaints really about parking on the street. The nature of complaint that I hear most frequently is simply this person at this property, and it could be in any zoning district that's residential, has far too many vehicles, and that's the most common scenario, but in those
But that
cases.
has nothing to do with the size of the properties, right? It more has to do with somebody who might have a bigger property, might have even more cars.
That's correct.
But if you've got a 3-bedroom house,
Well, yeah,
and you're gonna have at least 3 cars.
possibly. But I'm kind of trying to get to, who is it, like, is it a problem for, like, the people who live there? Is it, because they might not move there if they see all those cars around, if that's something they don't want? Or is it a problem with, we don't like the look of it because the setbacks don't allow for certain types of housing? I mean,
It can be a problem for emergency vehicles.
mhm.
It is definitely a problem for snow removal, and it's definitely a problem for street sweeping.
The smaller setbacks.
The more cars on the street,
Okay.
all right?
So if the.
And there's
So
also,
then, that could also then be dictated by parking laws as well, that no parking on the streets from, after, what is it, 2 a.m. or something like that?
we have that.
We have that.
Yeah.
So if, I kind of, like, we should be able to maybe enforce laws that prevent that problem.
I would love that to happen. Nathan and I were talking before the meeting, that enforcing parking laws is almost impossible. First off, we don't have anybody in Forest Lake to give out a couple thousand tickets before we go out and snowplow. In Forest Lake, only police officers can do that. And the second thing is, we do not have enough tow companies to tow the cars to someplace, which we also don't have. So we can have the laws in place, but like other laws that we have against properties with, people parking on the lawns, commercial vehicles parking on the lawns, or an accessory dwelling unit that is out of compliance, or a lot of junk, or somebody parking their RV next to somebody's bedroom window. We don't have enforcement mechanisms for that.
But then I guess my kind of question becomes, even if we make things smaller and/or larger, we're still gonna have those problems that we can't enforce. And so if I'm the type of person who doesn't want to live in a neighborhood where when I'm going there, I see the cars parked on the street, I'm not gonna buy there because I already see the problem. And I already know what it is. And if I'm the type of person that that's not gonna bother me, the inconvenience of it all, because I can afford this house, I'm okay with the setbacks, I'm not so sure we should necessarily say we need bigger lots, because people have different needs and wants and desires. So I'm kind of trying to understand, who are we speaking for? Are we speaking for designs? Are we speaking for protecting the ability for the city vehicles to get around? What are we hoping to accomplish by making bigger lots?
Well, I think you have to leave it up to the consumer.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
You know, I mean, if the consumer doesn't want these, they're not gonna buy them.
Right.
And that'll end that.
Mm-hmm.
If the consumer buys them like crazy, well, then we need to build more of them.
Right, which is kind of what our builders said.
Okay, or we have a lot of houses on small lots that are going to turn over, that are going to become rental properties that are a challenge for us. And we're gonna,
But you don't think that's the direction that the market's going anyway? Even with single-family homes, investors are buying single-family homes and renting them out because people can't afford to have the down payment, so they're renting. I think that problem's happening even with larger homes.
the Fed's latest report is that people are looking for larger homes because more of them are working at home and they don't want to be stuck working in the bedroom with, you know, they want a larger home with a larger lot because they're working at home and they want to be able to have maybe a vegetable garden and they want to have a separate space for his office and her office and then a den for the kids.
And
So
ultimately,
that was the last Fed report, but
and not a lot of people have that luxury, I don't believe. You know, the people who want it can have it and they're gonna get it. But I don't think that in general, people who want to buy homes can't really afford the homes that are out there. And they're moving two families into a home, mom and dad and the kids. And it becomes, you know,
Well, and if you look at, let's just take California.
mhm.
Their houses are on top of each other and they're 3 stories tall and they're awful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, they have a higher population than us, but we have a huge demand for housing. We have a huge demand. We have a huge shortage of housing. We can't build enough housing fast enough for all the demand. I mean, and there's not houses sitting empty anywhere.
is there a strong demand for $500,000 and $600,000 homes? Because that's the other concern that I have, is, okay, you're gonna have something on a small lot, it's gonna be they've already said that their price point a year and a half ago was 600,000 start.
Yeah.
And so if what he said earlier, then there's a 100% price increase, now you're looking at $800,000 homes.
I think all houses, you know, I mean, Justin could, you know, confer, you know, and answer, but, you know, I think all houses, they start in the 4s. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot, I mean, a townhouse, you might be able to find a new townhouse in the high 3s, mid 3s, but that would be a rare thing. There's nothing under 400,000 anywhere that I can find for new construction. When you look at existing, yeah, you can buy, that's your, you know, like I mentioned before, our affordable housing is our existing stock of housing. That's all, I mean, that's what's affordable today for some people. But 400,000 to 500,000 is pretty average, minimum. I mean, it's, I know it's hard to conceive. I mean, I've been in this business a long time and I remember, obviously, and I don't want to date myself, but you know, 69,000 was a stretch back when I was a young kid.
That
right?
was my first house.
Yeah, and you know, but, you know, I look at my daughter who's out in California. Her first house was 700,000. And I looked at her and I know, and I looked at her and I said, how do you afford that? I can't afford that, right?
And they're all moving to Austin, Texas, and they're buying up houses in my daughter's neighborhood and saying,
Yeah.
oh my God, I've never seen anything this cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think I would love to see all of our lots, you know, large, and I'd love to see all of our houses, you know, spread out and it'd be beautiful, but it's just not I mean, you know, you talk about the Fed, I mean, the majority of my kids, for example, you're young, they don't wanna mow grass.
Right.
They don't wanna shovel snow. They want a tiny lot because they don't wanna take care of it. They don't have time. They're not home anyways, they're out, they're working, you know, I mean, that's why the smaller lots are so appealing. They're less maintenance. I mean, think about your yard, for example. You know, I think about my yard, for example, and I'm like, God, do I wanna spend an hour and a half every week on my yard?
20
Right?
acres.
Right, exactly. Well, you're 3.5 hours or more and get some goats. But that's what we're seeing all over the metro area. And the people that want the bigger lots, they can find them. They're all over, right? You can buy acreage lots all over. I don't think, I mean, I don't know, my opinion is let the consumer decide. If the consumer don't want it, it's gonna sit there and they're gonna go bankrupt.
But then the city has something that we're really stuck with in terms of code enforcement and, you know, dilapidated, et cetera, and
We're stuck with that, with the existing homes.
Look at what we have right now.
You know? Matter of fact, I think that if we looked at things that are not up to code in the existing houses, we have a bigger problem than with the newer houses.
And the city can do things like, for example, if we anticipate that there's gonna be a lot of rentals, well, maybe we have rental licenses in our city. Maybe you have
I tried
point
that
of
once.
sale inspection. Well, you know, it's a different city, right? I mean, and I think the cities all have the same issue. How do we create revenue, right? And one of the ways is you have point of sale inspections, you have code compliance inspections, you have, I'm not saying we should do this. Anybody watching, I'm not saying we should do this, but rental licenses are a very common thing in a lot of cities today. So, you know, at least then you can control some things, and you can create a little revenue, so you know, the parking on the streets, if you have signs posted that say you can't park on the street between 2 AM and 6 AM, or whatever the time is, I can't remember what our city is.
there's no parking on any street from November 1st to April 1st.
Yeah, between certain times.
No parking any street between November 1st and April 1st,
Oh, I
if I
thought,
remember that correctly.
I thought it was 2 AM to 6 AM or
I
something.
thought there was a time period too, yeah.
I think it's an overnight,
I think it's an
Yeah.
over.
or
And-
if
We
it
just have
snows
to
more than
figure
2
out how to
inches.
enforce that, and, you know, someday we'll have an enforcement officer, if, you know, I mean, hopefully, and they can do that. I mean, we got people cutting down trees all over the place that aren't supposed to be cutting down trees, and clearing lots that aren't supposed to be clearing lots. You know, and building accessory buildings down on the lake shore without permission, you know, and it's all over the place. Putting driveways down the lots after they've cleared the lots without permission, because we don't have a driveway permit
That-
application fee, you know?
There's that one on First Lake, you know where it is, Justin.
Oh,
Do they have any freaking permits for that?
I would have to know what property we're talking
They bulldozed the
about.
whole
East
lot.
side
say
of,
they don't.
east side of First,
I
They
mean,
cleared the lot,
just
they
north,
put a driveway
just
down
about
there,
halfway
no
north of
permits.
the,
I'm sure
right,
there is.
and I don't see any sediment
Okay.
block, I don't see anything, and it's huge. And I think that they bought 2 lots there. In the paper last week, I saw the two lots, one next to each other.
Where's that?
Okay.
so if you were to come around
Those are
North Shore,
things we
kind of around the lake and
have to
down,
get
and it's
our
got that
council
big
to put in
bend
place
to the east.
It's
That's kind of
just
around that
crazy.
area.
Okay, well, if it was associated, this is very off topic, and I would
No, I know, I'm sorry.
suggest we bring it back, but I can appreciate the conversation we've had so far.
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
Typically,
That's
Oh, you
exactly
saw it
what
too,
I'm
yeah.
talking
So-
about.
Oh, yeah.
That's
So
what
I-
I'm talking about.
I think I've heard 10-foot, there's, do you have a preference on 7.5 or 10-foot setback side?
I don't see a problem with the 7.5. I've
Me
just
either. I don't
been
see
in
a
other
problem with 15.
neighborhoods and seen them at narrower than 7.5, and I don't think that's a problem, yeah.
And I'm more deferring to the fire chief on that, and I totally understand when it comes to, if you have a house that's on fire and you've got,
15 feet.
yeah, I mean, it's, the less space you've got, the more access and other houses burning.
And I mean, if I'm the fire chief, I'm gonna give you the most conservative answer I can possibly get, because that's my
Right, I
job.
understand, yeah, but I
So-
still, from my perspective, I still think 15 is too narrow.
Yeah, I mean, you look at houses in St. Paul and Minneapolis. I mean,
Right, that's what I was down
mean,
there
my God,
today.
They're
and-
right on top of each other, those
Mhm.
big
Right.
3 stories and 4 stories, and they've been that way forever.
Yeah,
And when they go up, they both go up.
Yeah, I get it,
Yeah.
I know, I've seen it, I've
And
seen
that's
it.
okay, I mean, if that is a community standard, then that is a community standard.
Yeah, and if I was, you know, consumers know kind of understand what they want.
Sure.
If you don't want to live with other people because you're worried that you live too close to a fire hazard, you're not gonna move there.
Correct.
Or you're gonna say, you know what, I got insurance that'll cover that, I'm not, you know, those are the risks you take. Nothing is ever perfect.
And we know the vinyl melts right off of them.
That's right. And it makes a nice little waterfall when it comes down.
That's right. But I think that's up to the consumer.
Especially young consumers, I think you're giving them an awful lot of credit. Considering the questions that I'm getting, after they have bought the house and are having their, you gotta be kidding me, moments.
yeah.
So are we looking at, where are we at on 30-foot rear yard setbacks?
You know, I'm more worried about the percentages of the impervious versus a 30-foot setback, because won't we get it anyway if we deal with just the percentages of what they can have actually built on the piece of property?
Percent
Well, that
impervious
only-
only reflects
That's only
shoreland
shoreline.
ordinance. It is not applicable anywhere else except for the shoreland ordinance.
Groundwater.
Okay.
I would just jump in and say, it's a common standard, the lot coverage in other communities throughout all residential zones.
The percentage.
The percent of hard cover on a property is a
And maybe
standard.
that's the approach we take, is more of a percentage, then houses can't get too big, they just have to kind of fit in that area someplace. And that gives people flexibility to move back or forward, or, you
And
know.
typically, you'll see both of those standards in tandem. Typically, the standard lot coverage, as an example, is 40 or 50. Not so much to limit the total structures in the property, but to ensure basically open space, and in addition, just stormwater management is another factor. So I'm hearing that there's not really many thoughts on the rear yard setback being 30 feet, give or take.
30 at least, yes. Can't have room for a garden and or a swing set or a
A car?
a fire pit or a pergola or, you know.
A storage building, because they'll need it.
I was teaching composting classes for the last couple of weekends and reminding people that their compost containers had to be 5 feet from the side lot line and 2 feet from the alley line. And not next to their house, because then they violate fire codes. Yeah. The last one we have to, the question is garage recess design. And Paul's not here, so I'm just gonna speak for him, and I know that Paul feels strongly about garage recess designs. Are there?
Strongly in favor of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there other folks that have feelings one way or another about garage recessed designs?
I actually have a question of what that term means. Is it recessed from the front of the house or recessed from some other place? What does that mean?
So that would be correct. So the garage recessed would be from, so you have like, for example, like an entry or a porch, right? And then you have a garage that is established behind that line from the street.
And a lot of the houses, am I wrong, I might be wrong, is that they're equal to or even in front of.
Correct, the garage, you're correct.
Garage.
It's referred to as like front-loaded.
Uh-huh.
That's the type of construction, and most often the garage is protruding, and it's the most forward part of the building.
Yeah,
All right.
because most houses, or a lot of the house designs say they're building rooms above that garage.
Right?
So they're usually out front versus recessed back.
Okay, so what would be the opposition for Paul and anybody else to require recessed design? What's the rub? I want to kind of understand.
I think the home builder would probably be good to speak to that, but when you come in from your garage to your house, you're generally entering your kitchen or that area close, because that's where you come with groceries and that kind of thing. And if you are having to set that garage back in, now you're kind of taking away interior space of your home. So the builders like to keep that garage out forward, because that's useless space
Okay,
anyway,
so
it's
why
garage space.
would we want to take that away?
For the appearance, right? That's why
Aesthetics
we're
is
looking
kind of
for
what
the
it's-
setback, to set
the
those
argument
garage
is,
back
yeah.
so that the neighborhood looks, you don't look at a bunch of garages, you know, because if you set the garages all forward, that's all you see when you're looking down the street is garage, garage, garage.
Okay, and if people are buying this, then they don't have a problem with it. And I'm not so sure, I'm not gonna buy a house in a neighborhood that I don't like. And I think a lot of people aren't gonna buy a house in a neighborhood they don't like. And so if, by chance, they have all these 3-car garages that are front and center, that might be really absolutely fine to suit their purposes. And so, you know, does anybody know why Paul is absolutely, would rather not have that? Is it all looks?
It's looks.
It's the aesthetics. And it's the fact that it becomes a really impersonal neighborhood. It's, the neighborhood doesn't have character. You don't feel like these are homes that are welcoming human beings and people there. What you have places to store cars. It's not a home, it's a garage.
Just a place to store your stuff. That's
Yeah.
just stuff first, and then you've got the home in the back is kind of.
Right.
I'm more with you from that argument from versus the setbacks and stuff. To me, that's a little bit of a separate argument than the one that you're making about the recessed garage. I would be more with you on what you're talking about, the recessed garage. It's like people are gonna either buy it or they won't buy it. They either like it or they don't. I'm not really, for, demanding that there's recessed garage.
Yeah, me either, and the challenge is depending upon the style house you build, right?
Right.
If it's a two-story or if it's a, because then sometimes the garage has to be, more forward, because you want that family room,
Right.
behind the garage, and, if it's a multi-level, I think you have to let it be up to the design of the builder based on the product they're trying to build.
Right, and then I think with the setbacks and everything like that, to me, it's
Setbacks are
more,
more important.
more of, if you're looking at the city as a whole, how is that affecting the whole city? Versus the recessed garage, whatever, I mean, there's the aesthetic part of that, but to me, it's not on the same plane as, that's just my personal opinion, but.
I think one thing with the, that setting, like the builder was here, he had a whole neighborhood of 74 homes, and he's gonna build those 74 homes. He's got 3 or 4 different plan layouts, and they're all gonna be the same. And so you're not talking about one odd house here that maybe has a garage forward, and then one odd, another house that has a different builder with a house back. It's an entire street, and they're all gonna look,
They
they're
all
all
look
gonna have
exactly
that
the same.
same look. So
Yeah.
that's the way to, but I understand what you're saying, that if someone's gonna buy a house, they're gonna buy what they like. If there's limited inventory of houses, you're gonna buy what you have to buy,
Yeah.
if you have to move to wherever. But, so,
If you have a large development and it just looks like that's all you see is garage, and I get that part, so where do you find that happy medium
Right.
of not limiting, but yet it has to look somewhat cohesive and somewhat normal as you're entering the,
And as he said, all of his houses will have exactly the same footprint.
yeah.
The only differences in those houses are what color it is, and maybe you might have a different size window in the front. But all of his stuff is gonna be exactly the same.
Yeah. Then they go buy up in Jackson Meadows and Stillwater then, if they don't like that, but if anyone has been there.
Yep.
And actually, I think some people like that kind of conformity, I do. It, especially, they just, where everything looks the same, and if you're anal like that, you probably love it. All the shirts, are lined up, whatever. It's uniform, it's,
so it sounds like maybe we would wanna not regulate that so much, or at least in general, that,
I don't
but-
think I would want to regulate it.
I wouldn't want to.
These are what your MXR standards are going to be, okay? If this is what you want, then everywhere where there is MXR zoning, you're gonna have this size lot with this setback and this garage forward or not. Just realize that we have a very large amount of the city that is MXR. And one of the reasons that folks have planning commissions is so that you can say 5, 10, 15, 50 years from now, that when they laid out the city, or when they thought about the city, or when they developed the standards for the city, they made it a place that somebody wants to live for the next 3 or 4 generations. Houston is infamous in the planning community. It has,
There is no
build what
planning.
you want, where you want.
There is no
Okay.
planning, I live there, it's
Yeah.
freaking
Okay?
nuts.
And-
Funeral home, house, you name it, it's all next door to
Right.
each other.
Okay? And that's the extreme.
Right,
But one of the things that 2 or 3 generations from now, folks are gonna say is, what did that planning commission do to make this a very livable city? Whether it's requiring 10-foot sidewalks, whether it's requiring how much between the buildings, whether it's making community gardens an integral part of any planned unit development, some of the park things that we've talked about. What has this planning commission in our comp plan, which is a 20-year comp plan,
Mhm.
what are we setting?
Well, this
For
is
the
what,
future.
this is what I'm seeing with what people are doing with their garage space now that became garage space, and it's at the front of their house, and now they're older and they don't have all the cars. They're putting in the nice floors, and they're putting in walls in their garage, and they got a nice garage door, and they've got lighting in there, and they use it as an extension of their home. And so I do think that the garage isn't necessarily gonna be the problem, because I think the garage can evolve into house space, and it might even change with the doors from being garage doors to stable doors that open into a living room. But again, that's gonna change with what the market needs are. And people renovate houses all the time based on what they now want versus what was existing. I'm a firm believer in people are not gonna buy what they don't want, and if we want people to live there, we have to give people what they need to live in a manner that is comfortable for not only them, but the neighbors around them. And is a 3-car garage that is not recessed gonna cause another neighbor a real problem? Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but if I'm that neighbor and that causes me a problem, I'm not gonna move there.
Nathan, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I just,
The MXR1, district, if we go ahead and adjust some of this stuff, that's just the minimum, right? I mean,
That's
we can-
correct.
they can still develop bigger lots if they want.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking at, just as an example, I'm looking at Chestnut Creek, right? 98 acres. And the density was 1.9 houses per acre because of all the wetlands, and we have a lot of wetlands. Then you look at Headwaters, 25 acres, they got a 2.68 density, and the lots are larger. So isn't that amazing that the lots were smaller in Chestnut Creek, 7,700 minimum lot size, and they only got a density of 1.93, but yet we had a 12,000 minimum lot size in Headwaters, which was a third of the acres, and they got more density.
okay, but what we did on
Because they didn't
Chestnut
have-
Creek and some of the others was we said they're PUDs. And, all
But they
right,
still got more density.
now wait a minute,
Yeah.
we said that they were PUDs, and so we want some variety.
Yeah, yeah,
Part of being a PUD is we've got variety.
right.
What he's done with this, all right, is every lot is the same size. All right, they're,
Potentially.
right, okay, looking at what he's brought here. So,
But he could have, based on the first plat, so let's just say we would have approved this, and he came in originally under that, and he could have did this first plat. Well, the first one, he had larger lots and smaller lots, and he had a higher density. Now he's got no choice but based on the water and stuff like that, to just do all smaller lots, so his density's gonna stay the same. Well, it's
coulda-
actually a little less.
he didn't have to have 74 lots. Nobody said you have to have 74 lots.
Well,
What he's doing is, he's saying, I want 74 lots, so this is the size that all the lots are going to be. And what I'm saying is that, yes, folks do want to make a profit, and if you say this is what our lower limit is, then you're going to make sure that you have the lower limit, because it is universal, and you don't have any flexibility to say, we'd like you to have a little diversity.
yeah, but
We will, what's that silly phrase? Run to the bottom or something like that?
yeah, no, well, we don't wanna be, it's not a race to the bottom.
Yeah,
But the challenge, Susan, and I totally get it, I mean, the challenge is, you buy this land for a certain dollar amount, whatever the dollar amount is. And then you take that land and you go, okay, I'd like to develop that land and build houses on it, and I'd love to build something that's affordable for people to buy. Okay, what's an affordable house? Let's say it's $450,000. How many lots is it gonna take to make that piece worth, so I can get lots developed at $450,000 a piece? Okay, so if the average lot to develop is $100,000, and that land to buy was, just say, $1 million, and you add those two up and you divide that out, it's gonna give you a number. And if that number is 50, that's great. If that number's 70, that might not be so great because you might not be able to do it. Because if they can't do it for an affordable price, they're not gonna do it. So that piece of land would sit there and nobody would develop it probably because it's not gonna get any cheaper.
Okay? But in time, somebody's gonna say, gee, I wanna move out toward Forest Lake, and there's a piece of property here, I could maybe do 5-acre lots. If you buy a piece of property and you pay whatever you pay, with the without realizing that a bunch of, I can't believe that I don't believe that developers are stupid. When
Well-
I bought my property, I looked at the comp plan. I said, what is possible?
Yeah.
I looked at the covenants on my neighborhood
Well-
to make sure that nobody could ever subdivide anything in my neighborhood. I looked at my soils to see what I could or couldn't do. How many horses could I put in there? Am I allowed to have?
What year did you buy your property?
Pardon?
What year did you buy your property?
1991.
Okay, 1991, and today is 2022.
And it has increased
But-
in value by less than 10%.
That's interesting.
What did you say?
She said it's
Increased in
increased in
value by
value less than 10%
Less than
in that many
10%.
years. That almost doesn't seem possible.
No, it doesn't.
So as an example though, someone who bought in 1991, let's just say that property was $100,000 and over the time of appreciation, it's now worth $400,000 as an example. The question comes, would you pay $400,000 for that property today? In your case, yes, but I'll bet you it's worth more than you paid for it, and somebody else is gonna look at it and go, you just made 300 or 400% on your investment, and with housing, that's what happens, right? Over time, it's gonna go up in value, and it's gonna increase in value, but the cost of everything else keeps going up. Look what's happening in our marketplace. Everything keeps going up every day. It's not gonna get any cheaper. And so if they don't have a way to do this, a developer's gonna just keep passing on it. That's why the developers aren't breaking down the doors, because it's too expensive.
And weren't we also concerned about, if we have these bigger lots, when somebody comes in to ask for a revision to the rule,
A
then
variance.
then we have to say, well, if we say yes to them, then we have to say yes to everyone. And that's the other argument. If we go smaller now, then we don't have to worry about the variance.
No, you're still going to have
Well,
variances.
but then we just say no.
Well, it's not that easy.
Well, I know it's not that easy.
But do we wanna keep doing PUDs is the question.
Right.
Or do we wanna get away from always having to do a PUD?
Especially if that's what the market is dictating right now. That's,
I think you have the sense of the commission.
Yep.
And I understand the
it's
desire to deal with right now and what is good right now. I have some concerns about the longer haul.
I'm not concerned, I am concerned about the longer haul. I really am. But I do believe that the people who are buying these houses are also gonna be concerned about the longer haul. And maybe some of the things that you are concerned about over the longer haul are concerns that you have that they're not going to have and they will never have. Maybe. Just maybe.
Yeah, and I get talked to by a lot of different people. Just in those that between FLA and beautification and a lot of different organizations that I volunteer with.
Mhm.
I get talked to by a lot of different people who are very frustrated with what they see as a lot of really small lots that they really don't value. They're really concerned about the number of apartment buildings.
Mhm.
They're really concerned about the need to pay for additional public works and additional firefighters. And we're gonna have to go here pretty soon to permanent firefighters, an additional police department. And they're concerned about when you have lots of, you pack things in and you grow very fast, you have those growing pains right away, as opposed to if you were to grow a little bit slower, you sort of spread out those growing pains.
So where do these individuals think we are right now? On the slow end or the fast end?
Fast end.
Yet it doesn't really seem like the city of Forest Lake is growing exponentially. Even since the last census, I don't think it grew that much percentage-wise. not as big as some cities have.
When you take a look at the development that's out on the west side of town, when you take a look at the Forest Hills thing, when you take a look at Chestnut Creek, when you take a look at the infill along the high school, you know, that whole good view to the east, I think there is a lot of development that's happened in the last 10 years, even with the recession.
And to the detriment of, what's the detriment to the people that are concerned? That there's more people here? I mean, how does it affect them in their own little space? When they drive around town, it bothers them? I'm kind of trying to, do they think there's more crime? Do they think it's something else?
Communities are gonna change,
Mhm.
and it's always hard on the folks that are in a place and have invested in a place, that it changes in ways that they didn't expect when they bought or when they moved here. And for folks that moved in here 10, 12 years ago, what they're seeing now isn't exactly, for some of them, isn't exactly what they bought into. And so, yeah, they're moving farther out. And they're responding to the market, and so they're saying, yeah, I'm going farther out.
I guess when I hear what you're saying, and I think about the properties on the lake, less than 50 years ago, it was a lot of cabins.
Mhm.
People buy 3 and 4 cabins and make this $1.5 million home. And who was concerned about the people selling the 3 properties all at once? I have a feeling there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about it. It just happened. And we adjust. And I would imagine that some of the people who own those small cabins are very upset that that $1 million home was built right next to them and there was nothing they could do about it. But that's change.
That was also township, and you could pretty much do what you wanted to. But many of those are the same folks that are now really angry
That's-
about, wait a minute,
Yep.
not about the people next to them, about the water quality in the lake. Because that water quality will continue to degrade
Mhm.
with the lots and the larger homes. I mean, and it will. So somebody that wanted to thought that they were buying someplace with water quality 5 years ago, sorry about that.
Yep. And so you have to do kind of what you have to do for yourself, kind of. If that bothers you that much, then I guess you have to make a choice, because nothing ever stays the same. It's always evolving and always changing. And maybe we can slow that pace down a little bit, but some people want this town to become a city with real services and a real hospital and more sidewalks and more parks and more trails and get some public transportation out here so we can not have to rely on our cars as much as we were. And we're not gonna get that necessarily with the way we're kind of, I guess, not building multifamily structures.
You won't get transit out here, period. That,
Never say never.
well, 10 years won't happen.
I don't think it'll happen in 10 years either. But isn't that part of what we're supposed to be working towards as part of this comprehensive plan and some state plans, that we need to get some ideas that are gonna make transportation move a little bit better?
It's why we joined the transit taxing district, because we were promised, and for a little while we had some transit. But the Met Council took that away.
But people want it.
Some people do.
Right, some people do, and some people actually need it. So, I think this is probably one of the best discussions I think we've had, myself. Because it's trying to understand what's good for the community, what's good for the individual, what's good for the future, and where should we not go, but it's also driven by the needs of the people at the time that, it's market-driven. And how do you mix all of that to make the best decisions? And ultimately, I'm not gonna worry about 20 years or 30 or 40 years from now, wondering somebody second guessing what we're doing here. If we're doing what we think is right at the time and it's based on the information that we have at the time, then you can always defend that. You can't look back and say, well, you woulda, shoulda, coulda. We don't know. And I'm not gonna ever apologize for that. And I don't think we should have to worry about that. I think we should just do what we think is the right thing for all of those entities to the best of our ability, period. That's what I think. So, and just, I'll get off my soapbox.
One of the things that Nathan's company is doing a very good job of is trying to get us safe routes to schools so that we can put in sidewalks. Because 20 years ago, folks said, we don't need no stinking sidewalks. I don't want anybody walking in front of my house. But now we're trying to retrofit. It's so much more expensive to move electrical poles and light poles and try and deal with the slopes and retrofit sidewalks in. Whereas if 20 years ago we had said, you know what, if we want to be a city someday, looking at other cities, they have sidewalks and they have parks within 6 blocks of every house. Maybe those are things that we should think about. And so I do worry, not only about what people think today, usually that's not my give a darn quotient. I really worry about 2, 3, 5, 7 generations down the line, and making sure that what I do today does not damage their ability to live and thrive. And I understand that's why we have more than 2 or 3 people, so that we have a real variety of perspectives and thoughts.
I think of all the, aesthetically, all that we've lost over the past 20 years in historical structures, and, we almost don't even have the capacity to have a historic district because of that. We've lost a lot of that character. So there's that, and just one example,
But right now, that's not a value.
what is?
Character. Having diversity in neighborhoods and character. Right now, the goal is to have, what people are buying is houses that all look like each other. It's one, as he said the other night, it's one plan. And you get to decide whether it's the kitchen then the dining room, or the kitchen then the den, or the den then the kitchen. But
I guess, the downtown plan seemed like there was a lot of feedback of wanting more diverse, but, yeah.
you have entirely too many notes, sir.
I got a lot of different notes on this pad. I almost needed more paper, so.
But did we cover your 4 bullet points for you?
Thoroughly. Then I appreciate, no, and I say that in jest. It is appreciated that you're providing some good feedback on those things and having some other conversations that I think are worthwhile from my
Sometimes
perspective.
those conversations just have to happen, even though they're sometimes not pertinent, but.
So if you're looking for any other updates from me,
Yes, please.
if I might suggest that, I will be here on Friday to work with Ken Roberts, who is the city's new planner. So Ken is starting, I think, tomorrow in office, and so we will be working with him to transition some of the zoning work and things that he will be responsible for smoothly, and help him get a kind of a foothold in everything, so.
Does that mean that we can start making emails to the zoning complaint line?
You'll have to work with Abby on that. I think the email line, the zoning email inbox is open though, and so you're welcome to send notes that way.
I didn't want to do it until there was somebody that was going to actually have time. But I have a list.
zoning@ci.forest-lake.mn.us.
Why did y'all not go to forestlake.gov?
Ask
No,
IT.
it's where a lot of cities are moving, and it just drives me insane to try and figure out which city that I'm working with is on which format.
Just wait till you guys all get a city email address. It's coming soon. That's my update. You guys will soon be getting city email addresses. I think you learned about that at the training.
Yeah.
So you will be getting those
Double
soon.
I'm sorry,
IT
I
is
had-
working on those, and once I have all of that
I had
set up.
another meeting that night.
Yes.
Yeah, once that's all set up, then I will be dispersing those out and sending instructions, but then also probably in the meetings, doing some kind of a demo so that you guys are able to access those email accounts, so you'll have access to those.
And we are going to be all very careful when we get those emails to not hit,
Reply all.
No reply alls.
Yes.
I wonder if we can disable that function.
Also, I would like to just take a second to mention too, just want anybody who's watching or listening, elections are all things transparent with elections. You can find election information on the city website. We have a full elections page. It's been updated as of yesterday. There's a web card on the front page of the website that talks about voting. Click on that. Also want to remind everybody that we did redistricting for this voting season, and so pay attention to your precinct and where you are going to go vote. If you're wondering, you can go to the Washington County Elections website, you can go to the Secretary of State website, you can go to the city website, and there's a vehicle for you to put your address in and figure out where you're supposed to go vote.
And related to that, City of Forest Lake used to have a state representative, and we now will have two. We are a divided community in terms of state representative and
Yes.
head election judge.
Yes,
Down at
that was-
I'm down at Headwaters, and it's, I'm not looking forward to this. It's going to be a real challenge, because folks don't realize that we're gonna be serving two separate districts, and the ballots look different.
Yep, that was part of redrawing all those map lines, so precinct 1 got split in half almost exactly horizontally. So the top half of precinct 1 is actually in a completely different district. So,
I may beg the city to take back elections from Washington County. I didn't get.
It's actually more cost effective to have the county do that. With the joint powers agreement that we have with them, it's more cost effective to have the county do it, so.
I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Non-debatable. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed?